Hello, I'm April Davila. I'm a novelist and certified mindfulness instructor. I help aspiring authors write more and suffer less. And today is First Page Friday. So we're going to take a look at somebody's first page, whether it's a novel or short story. We tend to stick with fiction here. And we're going to critique it. We're going to learn from this page that some wonderful writer was brave enough to submit and let us work with. So if you would like to send in your first page for a critique, you can check out the link below in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's jump into it here. I'm going to move me out of the way so we can actually read here. And we're going to start by just reading through the whole thing, and then we'll come back to the top. Now, the first page of a novel is usually about 250 words. That's what fits on a first page. So that's what we're working with here. Let's get started. Okay. And it's the first time I'm reading it, so forgive me if I misspeak or mispronounce names. I do apologize. Okay. Before coffee and the daily paper normalized Joycey Dupree's morning, she was sucker punched by the voices of Beverly White and Ted Chin. I'm going to assume that's news. Breaking news. Police are investigating a gang shooting in the West Athens area. Fatality involved. We take you to Patrick Healy, live at the scene. The shooting was summarized, but no names mentioned. Joycey snatched up the phone and dialed Marcus's cell phone. Voicemail again. She hung up and punched in her ex-husband's number. 4 rings. Finally, Wardell slurred through sleep-logged irritation. Hello? Wardell, is Marcus there? Don't know. Wasn't when I went to sleep. Wardell, wake up and check. There was a shooting there last night. Shit. They always shoot in here. You forgot? Joycey listened as he shuffled through the house. Unrest snaked its way from her head to her stomach. He ain't here, but when something happens, one of the fellas let me know. No news is good news. Joycey heaved a sigh. Right, Wardell. If you hear from him, tell him to call me. Ain't nothing gonna happen to that boy. He got a charmed life, and you need to stop worrying. You think your 23-year-old son, who's a member of one of the 2 most dangerous gangs in Los Angeles, has a charmed life, huh? Joycey ended the call and dropped the phone on the kitchen counter. She ran her hand over her short crop natural and tried to focus. Before she could collect her thoughts, the phone rang. She winced at the sound of the raspy voice of Ocelia Misery, her employer. Misery? It's funny that her employer is named Misery. Something kind of like Misery. Gives me a hint of how we feel about the employer. Okay, so let's jump up to the top. My very first thought, your first page real estate is so precious. It has to do so much that generally giving like headlines and things like that is not always the best use. Sometimes it works. Again, everything, and please keep this in mind in all my videos. These are suggestions, not rules. But let's start, we'll put that aside for a second. One of the main reasons they caught my attention is the names. So we get a lot of names on this first page. We get our main character, we get Beverly White, Ted Chin, Patrick Healy, we get Marcus, who we learn is the ex-husband, Wardell. Sorry, she calls Marcus, who is her son. Wardell is the ex-husband. And then we get one more name here at the end. That is a lot of people to try to keep track of. And since these 3, Beverly White, Ted Chin, and Patrick Healy, are not presumably, I'm making assumptions here, but this is like a news report that sparks the call. Whenever you give a character a name, you're cueing the reader into the fact that this person is important. Like, remember them, especially if you name a character on the first page, you're saying, this is one of our main characters, pay attention to them. Now, I don't know, maybe Joycey Dupree is like in the news business, but I'm guessing she isn't since she's just picking it up in the morning. I'm guessing these are not people who are going to be like consistently throughout. So my suggestion would be something like, before coffee and the daily paper normalized Joycey Dupree's morning, she was sucker punched by a news broadcast of a shooting in her son's neighborhood. Like, you don't have to give... or sucker punched by, I'm just gonna jump in here and start working. Again, it's your story. I'm making best guesses, so just roll with me here. Sucker punched by a report of a shooting in the neighborhood of her ex-husband. And not even naming him yet. You could say, the shooting was summarized, but no names mentioned. Joycey snatched up her phone and dialed Marcus's and dialed Marcus. Now, so the trouble here is that since we've said ex-husband and the next male name we get is Marcus, it's going to sound like Marcus is the ex-husband. So maybe what we need to do in the neighborhood of, in the neighborhood where her son lived with her ex-husband. The shooting was summarized, but no names. So just again, just staying with Joycey, not bringing in these other characters who presumably don't really matter much in the story, and not giving away that prime first page real estate to someone else's voice, like the news reporter. It's okay to keep us in scene with, because you've already got us in scene before coffee in the daily paper normalized. I mean, you could do a little bit more to actually, because you're saying before coffee. So what is she doing in this moment? You could say something like, just as Joycey Dupree was pouring her morning coffee. And that way, like, put us in the moment of what's happening. Just as Joycey Dupree was pouring her morning coffee, she was sucker punched by a report on the radio, so that we understand like how it's getting to her, of a shooting in the neighborhood where her son lived with her ex-husband. I would love, since you've bought yourself a little bit of real estate by cutting the lines from the reporters, you might consider giving us a line of her normal morning. Like, the sun was coming through the windows. Like, is it a good morning before this happens? Is she already stressed before this happened? You could give yourself an extra line here, leading us into the scene where Joycey is in this particular place and this particular time. Okay, so where her son lived with her ex-husband. The shooting was summarized, but no names mentioned. Joycey snatched up her phone and dialed her son. I would just stay with her son for now. Her son, voicemail again. She hung up and punched in her ex-husband's number. And then also, let's just, like, while we're at it here, let's just recognize that the formatting generally, when we're writing fiction, is 1.5 space. I'm just going to go ahead and do this 1.5 space, and you don't need lines between, you just indent. So let's just I'll just clean that up. Wardell, and there should probably be, I'm not a copy editor, but I do try to note those things when I find them. Wardell is Marcus there. So we're getting here that, like, so she punched in her ex-husband's number, 4 rings. Finally, Wardell slurred through sleep-logged irritation. Hello? Wardell, is Marcus there? Don't know. He was when I went to sleep. Wasn't when I went to sleep. I mean, this is actually really good dialogue. It feels very real and natural. They sound like exes, which I think is an accomplishment for this first page here. And then her insistence, Wardell, wake up and check. Like, she's like, go check on our boy. There was a shooting there last night. And then his response is very telling. Shit, they always shoot in here. You forgot? Like that. I love this exchange. Now, there's a little possibility to build in a little bit of scene on Joycey's part. Like, is she fidgeting with something? Because clearly she's nervous, right? She's upset. So you could have her like, Joycey, what would you have her do to fidget? And it used to be you could have them fidget with phone cords. It's not anymore. Joycey took a sip of her coffee, or maybe she pours cream into her coffee, like just like giving us a little bit of that scene on her end helps us understand. And this isn't a great example. Ideally, you would have something that kind of tells us about, I mean, even if it's just adding cream to her coffee, then we know she's the kind of woman who adds cream to her coffee. I don't know. This would be up for you to decide, of course, as the author. What is she doing while she is anxiously waiting for her ex-husband to see if her son is home? Joycey listened, and again, here's some opportunity. Give her something to be doing, maybe, or maybe she's just like, she feels like she should be getting her bag and be getting ready for work, but like she can't do it until she hears if her son's okay. Like, there's just some opportunity here to build in some scene work. Joycey listened as he shuffled through the house. Unrest snaked its way from her head to her stomach. So I like that unrest. That's good. So that's probably fine there. You don't necessarily need it to be ahead of shuffling through the house. I apologize, I didn't see that there. And then finally, the husband, the ex, says he ain't here. But when something happens, one of the fellas let me know. No news is good news. Joycey heaved a sigh. Right, Wardell. If you hear from him, tell him to call me. Okay, and then I also love "Ain't nothing gonna happen to that boy. He got a charmed life." This is really more like 2 sentences. He got a charmed life. You need to stop worrying. This is so. I think this tells me so much about the dynamics of these two people, and you kind of start to understand why they're divorced, right? like she is a concerned mom, and granted, I think moms can tend to worry a little bit more than dads in general, but like she doesn't seem too pleased about the fact that like he's out all night with his buddies. Don't worry about it. He's got a charmed life. And then this little bit, you think your 23-year-old son. So this would almost be expository, except that our author, and I don't know, I'm assuming our author has already kind of set up the dynamic that I feel like makes this work. You think you're 23. I wonder if this would be yours probably better, because she's like, okay, you think your 23-year-old son, who's a member of one of the 2 most dangerous gangs in Los Angeles, has a charmed life, huh? Tracy ended the call and dropped the phone on the kitchen counter. Like, she doesn't even wait for a response. So normally something like this would feel a little expository, but I actually think it works here. And it does some interest, like we get a lot of information in a sense. We find out, because we already know the boy is like old enough to have not come home last night, but young enough that his mom's still worrying about him. Not that moms ever stop worrying, but still. But then he's a member of one of the 2 most dangerous gangs. We get the Los Angeles part. Like we get a lot of information in that, and it manages to feel pretty natural, which is great. She ran her hand over her short crop natural and tried to, so then again, this is good. We're getting some good information here. I wonder, this is the kind of thing I think you could even drop like maybe up here. Like this is like that gesture of like running your hand over your head is one, it's a self-soothing gesture. So it would be very natural to have that happen up here, even while and then we get that peek at what she looks like even before we get too far into the story. Not that we're all that far, we're still on the first page. Before she could collect her thoughts, the phone rang. And again, I would say her. I'm assuming they're cell phones. I'm assuming if it's like a landline, maybe then the phone feels more appropriate. But then I think you need to say the assumption these days is that it's a cell phone. I think that's safe to say. So her phone. If it's not a cell phone, I think you need to call that out in the beginning, because it either is a period thing, meaning that like this story is taking place before cell phones were ubiquitous, or it speaks to a character who's not like using cell phones, which is that tells us a lot about that character. But I'm going to assume this reads like modern day. So I'm going to assume cell phone. She winced at the sound of the raspy voice of Ocelia Misery, her employer. Okay. So again, you've cut a lot of names and you've kind of led us in gently into the ex-husband, Wardell, and then is Marcus there. So by the time we get down here to this name, it doesn't feel overwhelming anymore. I'm like, by this time, I'm kind of ready for another name to come into the story. And this, since it's her employer, we know we're going to need to remember her name. You've given it to us. That's great. So in general, this feels like a really solid start to a story. I'm interested. We've got this divorced couple worrying about a son or rather she's worrying about the son, and dad is less worried. They're divorced. There's going to be some tension amongst the gang life, I assume. It's a portrait in Los Angeles. I love that. Being in Los Angeles myself. I think if there's anything that you could do more of, it would be really sneaking in some setting and some descriptions. So we don't know what does Joycey do? Like, I wonder if you could have her, like, maybe instead of just pouring her morning coffee, she's rushing to collect her bag to get out to her job as a defense attorney or a dental hygienist, or I don't know, a school teacher, whatever it is that she does. Have her like stacking her papers or collecting her laptop. Give us some hints of what kind of work this woman does. Why is she heading out? Presumably, as we head into this next bit with conversation with her employer. We'll learn more, but you can drop us some hints earlier, like in this first bit. Also, giving us hints of what does she look like. Maybe she is drumming her fingers against the side of her coffee mug while she's waiting for Wardell to check on Marcus. And you could tell us, like, does she have like polished nails, unpolished nails? Does she have those like really long, incredibly decorated nails? Like little details like that can tell us a lot about a character in just a couple of words. What else? I'm just looking for what other opportunities. Maybe she, if they're newly divorced, you could have her like note, like putting on her jewelry, right? And that like she feels, it still feels weird to not have a wedding ring, but she's wearing other rings to compensate. Or I know, just trying, that's our job as writers, is to try to find little creative ways to cue the reader into the details of this character. So while I think this is actually pretty solid, there's also a little bit of opportunity here to build in a few more details. So thank you, dear writer, for submitting your first page, for sharing it with us and letting us learn with you. And for those of you who are watching, if it's not your page, please check out the link below. Send me your page and we'll look at it together. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.